Well, there's always something. This is more or less 10, but definitely more than 10. We are having internet connectivity problems, and the live stream, is really just not going to work today. So I'm going to go ahead and record a session anyway. It will probably be, I don't know, I might just go until like 12:30 or something like I did on Wednesday because we're not really streaming. Do I need to turn anything off? Okay. So, yeah, there's always something. It isn't quite as dramatic as it was on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I managed to knock over my full mug of coffee with cream and sent it spilling all over the work surface there. Fortunately, it confined itself to just soaking all of the brushes. And it was water soluble, so I was able to clean it off. I guess that was a good thing. But it was, yeah, that was just a real mess. So today I didn't do that, at least not yet. My mug is way back there somewhere. Yeah. So, but today the internet is not working very well, so I'm not sure quite what you're getting, if anything. Anyway, yeah, it's always relaxing. It's always so relaxing on relaxing painting with dice and dungeons because there's always something. Today I've got not a submarine, but I've got this four-winged demon flying thing. And I'm supposed to make it look demonic, and I'm really not very good at that. So what I will be doing is painting it various colors of red and maybe try to do some purple highlighting and maybe even do a little pearlescent stuff on it. I don't know. There's a lot of feather detail, and it would be really cool to have that show. So I'll probably do some sort of wash on it after I get the base coats on. This might be one of those things that would look a whole lot better if after I tried what I was doing, we just reprimed it and let Nicole do it. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I've got some scarlet red here, which is a dark red, and some flat red, which is just red, and a really dark red, black red, and I've got some royal purple that I might try to use. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to do some dry brushing on it. I'm not entering this with a great deal of confidence. So I think what I'm going to do is the small wing feathers here. I think I'll do in scarlet red, and then I'm going to do the flight feathers in flat red. Okay. I'm just going to do the top at this point just to see how it goes. I'm not sure what to do with the body color. I might do the black red for the top of the body color and then shade it down to a lighter color underneath. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's supposed to be relaxing painting, so I guess I should put some paint on this thing. And yeah, all these brushes. Just got neatly put aside. I'm just going to grab them all. So they all got put away after they got spilled on. I feel like what I should do is just spend a whole lot of time talking about spilling things, because that's what I had been doing. Oh, this looks like, why not? I'll use this brush. So again, what I'm going to do is just the top of this, because I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. And I'm going to do a scarlet red base coat on all of the wing feathers. Okay. And then do a flat red, a lighter red on the flight feathers. And these are light enough that they'll show a wash. And then I'm going to maybe grab some royal purple. And I'm not very good at it, so it'll probably be a failure. And try to do like a dry brush with the purple on it. And we'll see how that looks. That might be enough to highlight all of the texture of these feathers. If not, if that doesn't work, and I'll try something else. You know, the detail on this, the texture is pretty deep. So I think it could put up with a fairly large numbers of coats of failed paint color. And if that works, then I'll do the bottom, and then I don't know. Let's see what happens. Can't get anything done until I get started. Can't finish unless you get started, right? Some paint. I got a new one of these. It's all clean now. So, yeah, the other one got really messy. Oh, and another thing, something I know I can do is the sword broke off. There's supposed to be a sword here. That broke off, so I have a toothpick replacement, and we'll see how this goes. I don't know. We had that storm that knocked us out for like 4 days, and so I missed Friday and Monday, and got back in Submarine Wednesday. It was an abbreviated session, but I got done what I needed to get done. You know, in preparation for maybe doing some assembly this next week. We'll see how that goes. And everything seemed to work okay. I mean, other than the spill, but people were chatting and everything seemed to be working. So unless the shutdown, didn't work right. Yeah. Anyway, stuff happens. So this is going to be a complaining day. That's way too much paint, probably. So I'm just going to start putting red on here. Brush a little bit later when I paint the flight feathers, the bigger feathers. This will move things along a little more quickly here. Wing feathers. So as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, well, I might as well do the bottoms of the wings too, since I've got a lot of paint out. This shows up as pretty bright red, but it settles down to a nice darker red. And if I use like a wash on this later, darkening. There's a lot of texture on these wings, and so this is the kind of thing where what can happen is that it looks like it's painted, but then the paint doesn't get into all the little nooks and crannies, and then what you end up with is just a whole lot of, where you want the paint down into the openings there, the low spots is that sometimes where it doesn't go. especially, I'm wearing my trifocals, so I can sort of, but not quite see what I'm doing close up here. This is the kind of painting that it looks okay. Okay, with trifocals on, and then if I do something like I get out my head magnifiers and look at it, it's everything about this is not good. So I'm going to avoid looking at it with my head magnifiers because then I would be aware of all major flaws. And the internet problems. So I don't know if there's any streaming going on or not. It's hard to tell. If there is, it's not very good. But you can always catch this on YouTube after it's done. But I'm just explaining what's happening here because there is like always something. It's there. In the scheme of things, this always something today. The internet not working, at least as well as it should be, is nothing compared to what people are going through because of losing power for 4 days after the storm here, and then who knows how long in parts of Florida. The area of Florida that got hit is kind of spread out and rural, and the problem with locations like that is that you can't just fix a substation and have everything pop back on, right? If you in those areas, sometimes each individual house has like hundreds of yards of wire running to it from a main line. And then what you end up with is that you just have to fix one wire at a time. And it can take a really, really long time to do that. And you can't really set priorities either. You just sort of go from upstream to downstream as well as you can. So what are they called? Linemen? The people who fix electrical stuff spent, like 4 or 5 days here after the storm this weekend, and then got no time off when the hurricane hit in Florida. And pretty much, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing a lot of them just ended up going down there to continue their work fixing electrical connections for people nonstop. Hopefully there will be a break and not have any major storms anywhere for the rest of this coming week so that they can catch up and maybe, get home and say hello to their families and rest up a little bit. Like, I'm just going to paint the bottoms of the wings the same as the top. I don't have that very many different colors to work with. So what I might end up doing is just doing, I don't know, I can't do shading very well anyway. So we'll just do what I can to make this look demonic. And it's supposed to be a demon, a 4-winged wyvern-like flying demon thing. I'm sure that it is actually some sort of DnD monster, but I'm not that familiar with all of them, so I can't tell you what it is. But if you're seeing this and you know what it is, then you know what it is that I'm painting. I'm painting one of these, whatever it is. Being not connected, I don't think anybody's going to be chatting in live chat because it doesn't exist today. Nobody's asking for a flip. Do a flip anyway. But yeah, I'm putting red paint on the wings of this flying demon creature thing. Thanking all of the people who are spending so much time and energy restoring electricity to people who have lost it because of one storm or another, one after the other. I never did fix the clock. So I have this nice wall clock that's large enough for me to be able to see it without my glasses on. And the battery out, because there's always something. Fortunately, they're usually small things like the battery went out, but we didn't have any batteries. So that had to wait until we were able, just, had to run out and get batteries. It takes these 9 volts, which aren't used very much in much of anything other than like smoke detectors and stuff. Anyway, I got it going, but set it right. What a surprise. And so the time on it is now an hour ago. So that is a way of saying that it's like 10:30, but the clock says 9:30. The other thing about this is I can't use one of those little holders because there's no place to stick it. So I'm probably, anyway, we'll see if I can avoid getting my fingers into too much wet paint. Not going to be easy because, I'm holding what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing it by the flight feathers to hold it while I'm doing the main wing feathers. But the thing I want to paint next are the flight feathers. Yep. Things are being a challenge. The flight feathers, the thing with that is that you don't have to worry about too much about shading from one color to the next yet, because the flight feathers are pretty distinct from the rest of these. What I should have just done is gotten out the red speed paint and splashed it on here, and then it would have been speed painted. But probably I'm going to have a shorter session today like I did on Wednesday and just end like maybe around 12:30ish or so. And part of it is because we're not streaming because the internet connection isn't working, and part of it is we'll just see how this goes. I mean, maybe sometimes I've gotten lucky, and it's luck rather than skill. I will definitely admit that. And whatever I did in terms of like shading or highlighting or something actually worked out and looked okay. It doesn't always happen, but it has happened, and it's always a pleasant surprise when it does. So when Nicole does relaxing painting, because she is trained artist, she is a trained artist. She has learned techniques and developed skills that, you know, intentionally and successfully leading to things looking really cool. I, on the other hand, have never had that kind of thing. And my major skill is, and I've said this many times before, pretty much learning how to stay in the lines. I learned how to color and stay inside the lines, which is really, not necessarily a good thing. I was a very obedient student and stayed inside the lines, but the people who were creative didn't. So I ended up being a compliant coloring book color as opposed to a creative one. It's going to be a little bit of a thing here, getting the paint on that correctly. Well, at least I've been staying on camera. There is that. Okay, well, there's a bunch of feathers that are now red. And now I'm going to get out a different red and paint all the flight feathers. I think I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush just to do the outlining, where where one meets the other, so that's a little sort of precise. And then I'll probably come back to this brush and fill in the rest. And then I'm going to look at it and go, what do I do with this now? Because it won't look very good. I mean, it will look red. It will look 2 shades of red, but it won't be very interesting. And I have to decide whether I want to put a wash on it or do some dry brushing or highlighting or both. What would be kind of cool is if I could, like with these big flight feathers, if I could get a highlight color, and maybe I'll use the purple on that, and either do the tips, like try to do the tips of the feathers in the purple, or the roots of the feathers. I don't know. We'll get the red on it first and then start putting other colors on it and see what happens. You get to hear the buzzing of the vortex mixer. That's pretty cool. He drones on almost as well as I do. Yeah, it's enough of that. Let me poke through the brushes here. This brush might work okay. I don't want to use the really, really teeny brush, because it doesn't have to be perfect. Anyway, this is another red, different from the first red. It's a little lighter. See what happens when I put it on the feathers here. And just go ahead and paint them all. I thought what I might have done was use this to just do the outlining, but it's working well enough that I just go ahead and paint. right on to the tips of the feathers. Looks kind of orangey at the moment. Doesn't look like that on the color chart. So I'm hoping as it dries that it gets less orangey, or that when I actually start doing some shading on it, that the color will look okay. There was one of those spots that I knew was going to happen. This wing didn't get painted initially, where it shows the most. So yeah, on the color chart, this looks like a very dark red, but at the moment, it looks pretty orangey. So these feathers are definitely going to need some sort of shading of colors. And I'm going to try the purple on it. That was suggested to me yesterday. It's like, what colors should I paint this? I have no clue what this is or what it should look like. Oh, make it look demonic. That was, I guess, really not very helpful advice. And what do you mean demonic? Well, you know, reds and purples and demonic stuff. Yeah, so this dries, I'll have a better idea what I'm dealing with, but this is definitely going to need some sort of shading on the red. The, the scarlet red is really a nice color. We use that a lot on minifigs and even on dungeon tiles sometimes. You know, if we're doing like a red granite or something, we've been using that. But it's a really nice, deep, dark red color. It's really cool. Yeah. And as I'm looking at this, I'm seeing what I expected to see, which is that down in the crevices, I'll call them that, the spots where the dark red didn't get into them and they're showing up as gray spots. So I'm going to keep this brush handy and every once in a while dip it in there. And so looking at this, as this is drying, it gets a deeper red color, so it's not quite so orange. I'm going to have to start thinking about what I can do in terms of adding interest to it by highlighting it or shading it with the painting technique that I do not have. What can I go on about? This is relaxing painting. It's not very taxing at the moment. It's flat red, but it's still maintaining a fair amount of gloss. I'm not sure what's up with that. On the color chart that I painted, it doesn't look glossy at all. Yeah, I get to sigh. I am now officially old enough You see those ads that say everybody becomes their parent. Well, I'm like a generation past that stage. So when someone sits down and goes, because that's what they do when they sit down, I get to just do that because I'm the one that they're becoming. So there, take that reality. Yeah. Nicole, who is the real artist and does really good painting, said, "Well, why don't you put some like purple highlights on this?" I'm thinking, I don't know. Will that look okay? I don't know. We'll find out. I mean, it kind of looks okay as it is, but it definitely needs a wash or shading or something. But the color combination is, as it's drying here, and as the red kind of flattens out and gets darker, like along here, it isn't quite as contrasty as it is where it's wet. That's a good thing. It just dries a little bit, which will be, it's going to be drying because it's taking a while, and I have to do the bottoms of the wings yet. So, yeah, plenty of opportunity to watch paint dry here. I'm going to pull out. I'm going to pull out the purple paint, the royal purple. It's the least blue of the purples we have. Purples can go all through the red to blue range, right? I don't really want to use bluish ones on here, so it's the least blue. We can't say it's the most red. And I'm going to just one of the wings. I want to play with doing some shading from the base of the feathers toward the tip, just kind of touching it with a little bit of purple. And might just do like a couple of feathers near the, near there, and just see how it looks. It might be the kind of thing that would look best if I knew how to dry brush well to get the purple on feathers, the little feathers on the wing, and have it shade into the flight feathers. I really don't know how this will look. To skill and painting imagination, I would just say, I'm just going to wash these and not try to do any shading on them. But I know that would be like almost a cheating way out. Nicole would. I have to keep talking about her because she's an artist and does artsy things in a very nice and artistic way, and they look amazing when they're done. Would probably already have plans for like 4 different layers of dry brushing and shading and highlighting. Nation runs to let's put a color on, and if it looks really flat, pull out the wash and put some of that on and hope for the best. So I'll mix this up a little more. Out of the brush. It's not building up on the brush terribly much, so that's good. And I'm going to use another well because sometimes when the paint dries in the bottom of the well, you get like flakes of it coming up and off. And they wouldn't show much on here, but it wouldn't be a very good thing. One could avoid it. So one thing that's kind of accidentally happening, which is kind of neat, is that the this red paint is like some yellows, reds, and oranges tend to be this way. A lot of them, because they're kind of translucent. The pigments don't cover all that well, and so what I'm getting is variation in color, which is a good thing. The back edge of the wings here, you can see, are not being covered that well. So I'm not sure that I'll catch them very well from the bottom. I mean, that's one way, but I'm going to touch them here, and then one of the last things I'll do is rotate the model in many different orientations, because almost inevitably things look like they're covered, and then with a simple rotation, find spots that never got painted at all. This might kind of minimize the amount touch up later, but as this is drying, it's starting to look okay. I'm almost tempted. Here's some spots that got done wrong. The paint done me wrong here. It's really obvious, and now I can't even see it. It's the place where there it is. It's one of those things that looks different from different angles. Okay, well, whatever. Let's start painting the bottoms. I'm almost tempted to get some copper paint. We have some nice copper. And I was thinking of doing, we have these pearlescent paints. I was thinking of using those, but I'm almost thinking, given the color here, that trying to dry brush on some copper highlights, maybe like along the leading edge of the wing. That might look pretty good. I don't know if that's demonic, though. This, this is supposed to look demonic. So I don't know if copper highlights would look demonic or not. But I think it would look really good with the reds. Things went quiet upstairs. I know you can't hear a lot of the sounds because the microphone has some sort of filter thing on it that's supposed to, block out noises that are distracting and disturbing to a listener. Yeah, there was a lot of movement among the people and the dogs upstairs, and now it's eerily quiet. Maybe their internet's working better upstairs than it is down here, and they're all just, doing work. Maybe they're doing work. Maybe they're entertaining themselves. What I know is they're not watching relaxing painting on Dice and Dungeons because the stream just isn't working today because the internet connection down in the workshop area, for an unknown reason, we took some time. That's why it started late, trying to fix it, and then it isn't fixed in the sense that it is not. It's just really, really slow. Anyway, yeah, I decided I would go ahead anyway, and this session is being recorded at least, and will appear on YouTube. It's an edition of Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons, some sort of flying demon thing, just like it says. That no doubt is actually some sort of named monster in Dungeons and Dragons. And although I've played D&D forever, I have not ever DM'd and read the books and prepared that kind of thing. So, yeah. But Dice and Dungeons plays Dungeons and Dragons and is well over a year into an amazing adventure created in a world created by our dungeon mistress, Alexis. It does all sorts of D&D thingies and some that are not usual. We have spent a good deal of time doing retail shopping. My character has accumulated a small collection of souvenir tote bags that I've picked up from the places we visited. I think one of them is really quite rare because it comes from a city that was lost and abandoned for a very, very long time. Fortunately, there was almost sort of like a time lock or something on the souvenir shop, which was good because I was able to get not only a tote bag, I think it was on Risto, not only a tote bag, but also a snow globe, or, the equivalent, the D&D equivalent of what a snow globe would be. What happened there? Did I touch that? Thought I was being really careful, but it's like I must have gotten my fingers into the paint here on that wing. I do that, somehow or other. I'm able to get paint on my hands without actually touching any of the painted surfaces, or at least that's what it feels like I haven't really touched them. because I don't recall sticking my fingers there where the paint is. But then I'll look around and there's paint on my hands. And in this particular case, it looks like I was able to get my fingers into a previously painted area on the wing. Just checking the edges of the wings here and the little openings and stuff, especially the tips of the feathers, to make sure that they're painted. And then I'll go on to the other side. On to the other side. But yes, back to Dice and Dungeons. I remembered what I was talking about. That's something. We've been playing this campaign, and you all, anybody who's watching this, not on a stream today on YouTube, but on a live stream next week when we get everything fixed, because of course it'll get fixed between now and Monday, because there's time between now and then, and we can find out what went wrong, because things that we're working on Wednesday aren't working today. Back a long time ago, they probably still call them this, but Dad and Uncle both served in the Army Air Corps. It was the Army Air Corps then during World War II. And they became familiar with gremlins. And not the kind of gremlin, that you put in a blender in a movie or something, that you can't feed after midnight or however. But these were the original real gremlins that haunted their aircraft, because they had an experience very similar to the experience we're having with our internet today, which is that everything was working perfectly fine. And oftentimes with these older planes, there was a very specific shutdown procedure. They had extremely complicated piston engines, and not just like a V6 or something. There were many, many pistons on these things. And they had to be shut down very carefully. And so, everybody did it by the book. We're very careful. And then the next time that it didn't start. And it was supposed to, because if you do everything right, then something that was working perfectly fine the day before should continue to be working perfectly fine, but they didn't. Or there were certain things that just absolutely could not fail. There was like minuscule little chance that there was a failure point, because it was pretty much just like a wire, right? And nobody cut the wire, and nobody stepped on the wire or kinked the wire or in any way damaged the wire, but whatever was connected to the wire wasn't working, because somehow or other there was a gremlin. And so that, since there was no other explanation for the cause of the failure, because everything was done perfectly well, documented, double checked by the crew chief officer, or NCO probably, the crew chief, ground maintenance people, stuff didn't work. So I think what happened is that we were visited by a gremlin. You know, one of the original real gremlins, not the movie Gremlin. And that although everything was working perfectly fine on Wednesday, and everything was shut down just the way it should be, and restarted just the way it should be, there was something that decided not to work. It didn't decide that. It was visited by a gremlin that screwed it up between now and then. I think, yeah, there was actually a famous Twilight Zone episode. It had William Shatner in it. You can catch this on whatever streaming service you have that has old stuff on it, or during one of the Twilight Zone marathons that I think play like on New Year's Eve and maybe even Halloween. I'm not sure how often they have Twilight Zone marathons, but one of the old ones with Rod Serling, you know, this one had William Shatner in it. The Twilight Zones used to have all sorts of really famous people in them. I don't know if they were famous at the time, but they featured people who, yeah, I think they were all famous at the time. It was kind of like a thing to do a cameo on, or even a leading role on the Twilight Zone. It's everybody had an opportunity to do that. People whose names I can't recall because, you know, remembering things is for the young. Remembering things is for the young. And anyway, this one I remember because it, you know, these things aired at a time when people who were familiar with gremlins and their origin and their activity really, you know, fully understood what was going on when this gremlin kept walking around on the wing of the airplane that William Shatner was on, and kept trying to tear off the panel that covered the engine, which would have been bad because they would have been able to access the engine and shut it down. You know, but being Twilight Zone, of course, what happened is that poor William Shatner was the only one who ever saw it. And when he kept calling people over, you know, to come look at the gremlin tearing up the engine, they just thought that he was, you know, becoming irrational. Eventually, when they finally landed, they escorted him off into an ambulance. But the kicker was in the show that then the camera panned over to the plane, and in fact, the panel over the engine had been pulled up. It's real. Okay, well, there's that. And the colors, once they dry, and this red is drying very slowly. It actually looks okay. The colors, kind of Firebirdy, I guess, rather than demony, but we'll see. See what happens when I do more to it. Oh, wait, is there? Yeah, there's a whole. Okay. Wow, like there's a whole section here. Again, this is you rotate the thing and then you start seeing stuff. I mean, not seeing things like William Shatner was seeing things during the Twilight Zone episode, but things that are actual, real flaws in the paint, which in this case is that this didn't get painted there. Now it did. And there's another spot. So now that I've got this paint out, I might as well do a thorough inspection of the scarlet red and find all of the spots that aren't painted correctly. And then there's the tail feather, the flight feather back there wasn't painted, so I have to get the other red out. Probably an area that could never be seen by anyone because it's stuck way in the back and underneath. But having now seen it, I'm going to fix it. At least make an effort to get that paint on there. Now we get to watch paint dry for a bit. These old piston engines, as they became more powerful, the way they became more powerful, because the planes got larger, they wanted to carry more cargo or bombs or passengers. The piston engines just needed to keep getting bigger, and the way they got bigger was they kept adding more pistons. And so you went from like an 8-piston rotary engine to a 16 to I think, and I can't remember, but there was an engine that was used on the B-36 bomber, which was a gigantic beast of a thing. I had 6 of these. And it was so big that those didn't produce enough power for it to take off when it was fully loaded. And so they added 4 jet engines. Jet engines were not very powerful back then, back in the early 1950s, late 40s and early 50s. But they had 4 of these, 2 on each wing, that they had to use just to get the thing up and going. But these engines were so complicated that they were frequently visited by gremlins. They're the kinds of engines that everything was shut down according to the many step shutdown procedure, and then they didn't start the next day. And then similarly complex engines were used on a famous passenger plane, the Lockheed Constellation, and I have a model of it here. It's a beautiful plane. I suppose that camera there should just be aimed over this way a little bit, or I need to sit. Maybe I should sit over here. Not that you need to particularly see me very much as I'm doing this, but, they set up the studio with the cameras, so I should respect that and use it. Yeah, the engines on those planes were some of the most complicated piston engines as well. And wherever they flew, any of the airports to which they flew routinely always had a supply of spare engines, because they would fail. Sometimes they'd fail in flight, but more often they'd fail to start up again after they were shut down. And so there was almost always in many of these places, a bunch of spare engines that they could very quickly swap out because they were just really complicated. So one of the reasons, we keep thinking of, jets took over from piston engines, but even though the early jets were really underpowered, they didn't produce as much thrust. They didn't have the big fans. They didn't have the materials to make giant turbofans initially, so they were just basically straight line turbines. The they were simpler than these piston engines. Basically, they just had things that were spinning around the central axis, and as long as they got the fuel flow into the combustion chambers right, and the fans, the compressor fans, and turbine fans that drove the compressor fans, the blades stayed on. That was kind of an issue. They were much simpler in that there were just vanes on turbines, fans basically, and they spun around, as opposed to like 32 or 48 pistons all driving a single crankshaft. Can you imagine the effort that had to be put into the timing of that? And they didn't have the electronic ignitions that we had now. They were like the distributor on a car, except many, many, many more times complicated. Yeah, it's kind of amazing that these things could work at all. But then they mostly did. But yeah, jets took over, not only because they eventually ended up flying faster and higher, but because they became more reliable, easier to maintain. Although the first jets were, plagued with all sorts of problems that we don't have now. Yeah. So now I'm looking at this and going, and what do I do with this? Do I really do some sort of purple thing on it? Kind of a nice firebirdy thing. If it weren't demonic, I would actually just try to do some copper highlights. But okay, well, what I am going to do is I'm going to get the royal purple out, which is the least blue of the purples that I have. It'd be nice if I had a slightly redder purple, and I could make a slightly redder purple by mixing the colors, but the problem when I'm mixing custom colors is making sure there's enough of it and they don't have to use it again later, because getting exactly the same color again is an iffy proposition. Anyway, yeah, gremlins and airplanes. Gremlins were a big thing with anything mechanical back in the 1940s, and continued to be a thing probably up through the end of the 50s and into the early 60s, and then gremlins just seemed to fade away. This thing's just got to be more reliable, and the mechanic crews, no one believed them about gremlins getting in the way, and anyway, we had a gremlin sometime between Wednesday and now that managed to make our internet connection down here not work. Excuse me, I have to get my official not spilled on the work surface Dice and Dungeons mug. Okay. So Nicole said, do purple highlights. Like, I could just go ahead and do that, right? What I want is kind of a stiff brush. Okay. I have no clue here about what this is going to look like. So I'm trying to get just a little bit of paint on here. And I'm going to to my imitation of dry brushing. On the main feathers here. Will be. Well, I have to admit, I don't know if I'm doing it well or not, but it does look better. It looks pretty cool. The purple goes pretty well with what's on there. And so I'll do the bottom too. And I think the copper would have looked pretty cool, but it wouldn't look as demonic as the purple does. Similar. Now I got purple on that. The flight feathers. I don't know what to do about those. They're not dry yet. I mean, that red paint is taking a long time to dry. So I'm going to leave that alone, at least for now, and start to do something with the body of this. Purple seemed to work on the wings okay. I'm almost tempted with the flight feathers. I don't like the way this is showing here, where it's a little darker near the back. It's doing something like making the tips of the feathers darker. But I don't want to use the purple again. I'm going to use the black red. It's a really dark red on the top of the body. Yeah, the thing about this is the wings, and the body shouldn't really detract, and there isn't that much texture on the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the body, base coat the entire body in this dark black red. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll get a lighter color and do some highlighting on the underside to lighten it up rather than, and just do that with a highlight rather than trying to do it with a different color now. So a definite issue here is, like I said, I have this like sticky tack holder, but there's no place to hold it. I'm going to use the tail. I guess I'm just going to grab it there and paint the rest of it. There's a lot of detail on the face, teeth and stuff, the inside of the mouth. Yeah, save that for later. Because the face needs to get its due. I'm going to use this tiny. Oh, this is the one that isn't torn up yet. I really like these itsy bitsy little brushes, but the bristles tend to disappear with use. Using this to paint around the wings. And I'll use a larger brush to finish, but I need to have a little bit more spatial control up here around the top of the body. And the tail here is not going to get painted right away because it's the only place I can kind of reliably grab onto it. But again, I'm going to paint the entire thing this dark color. Where I want it lighter, I'll use a lighter paint and do my best to do highlighting on it. And I think the body can be pretty dark because the wings are the thing that really makes this model, not the body, and the face and the horns and things. I'll highlight those when I get around to painting the face, which may or may not be today. I'm looking at ending a little early today in recognition of the stream just isn't working. When you're visited by gremlins, it's best to respect their wishes and not push things too hard. This was definitely a gremlin-y day. Wednesday, there was like one disaster after the other, but that wasn't caused by gremlins. That was caused by me just knocking things over. Okay. So this is a pretty good brush for this, so I'll keep using it. Like I said, I'm just going to paint everything, the whole body this color, and then do something with it later to put lighter highlights on it. I'm not sure what. But I think this is a really good dark demon themed color. I might even be able to use like one of the more orangey reds, or even the red that I used, even the scarlet red on this red, or the flat red, and as opposed to a base color, using it as a highlight color, I think would actually look pretty good. It won't look like the same color. I could do things, if I got really ambitious, I could even do things like try to paint the fingers, make those look like redder at the tips. But the base color of the body is going to be this very dark, it's called black red. It's not really brown. When it goes on, it looks brown, but it's much redder than that. I can use these other red colors because they will actually look lighter against this dark color. They look like dark colors themselves, but there's a lot of surface area on this body. And then there's a lot of detail here, the finger grips on the sword, which doesn't exist. After I get this base coat on and letting it dry, I think I'll start working on the sword blade, a replacement blade for the sword. Okay, now the face, I'm going to paint parts of the face like this, but like the inside of the mouth and the frills around the side here, those are all going to be a lighter color, much, redder and fierier and stuff. Get the base coat on. I get the base coat on everywhere. I usually don't do this way, but it seems to work. It's kind of the way Nicole does it too, is you get the base coat and then put the other colors on afterwards. but this is still there, you know. Giving it an undertone. That's why it's called a base coat, right? Okay, to grab it by the tail here. You know, a lot of spots that is possible to totally miss here. Yeah. I'm not going to work on the face, I think, today because it's just been that kind of day again. And I'm going to be using a teeny brush with lots of different colors for the inside of the mouth. And then the teeth need to be painted. And I just know that that's the kind of thing that is not going to go well. So after I get this base coat on, and I'm going to let it dry, and while it's drying, I am going to fabricate a sword blade to replace the one that I think it just didn't get printed right. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it broke off. These things are pretty. This is some printed thing, not a PLA printed thing, and I think it is kind of brittle. And I have broken off many fragile body parts painting these or prepping them or knocking them over. So I think what happened was that the sword it just broke off. I have fashioned probably at least a half a dozen toothpick replacement swords for various models now over the last many months. This one got broken off and lost, and I don't know what it was actually supposed to look like. So I will make something up. This is a fearsome demon thing, so it might even have like a demon blade. And the demon blade might be like red, not quite flamey, but in that kind of vein. I think it's going to be fairly large. Shading this because there's always spots that didn't get painted, and they're just like really obvious, like the fronts of the knuckles here on the hand. They're very obvious, but they're not seen until it's too late. Okay, well, this color it's still pretty shiny, but it will flatten out as it dries, and there's enough red in it that I think with like this red as highlighting that it should come out okay. I still don't know what to do with the flight feathers. It's not urgent yet because that paint still isn't dry. And it's dry enough to hold on to it, but not dry enough to do something else. Well, that's my excuse. I really don't know what to do with the flight feathers in terms of highlighting them. But I think the tips of the feathers should be highlighted, and I'm thinking darker rather than lighter. In fact, I'm going to try that on just a couple. Okay, well, that's really dry brushing. To go this way. Um, yeah, usually if there's that much paint on it, there's actually too much paint. And I think that's what I end up, what I'm going to want to do though, is I'm not getting the effect right here that I was thinking of, but I think that's what I'll end up trying to do. I'm going to set this upside down because the deal with the face probably on Monday. Build that brush. I'm going to have to just order more of them. I might as well order like a dozen of those things because they don't seem to last very long. I don't know that there's anything else with that fine at point. Like the bristles dissolve in water almost. It's weird. You can see that that's still really glossy. That paint is not drying very quickly, and this red is not drying that quickly either. But right, I'm going to work on a sword. Yeah, I'm going to pick this up one more time just because, and I'm trying to get a sense of. I don't want to pare that down terribly much, but I think it might be like this long. We can always make it shorter, but I'm going to initially carve the blade so that it is this long. And then I'm just going to use sandpaper to thin it out and contour it, give it kind of a point. And if it's too short or too long, well, if it's too short, I'll just make a new one. If it's too long, I'll just make it shorter. Here's sandpaper. Here's a toothpick. And this toothpick is going to be sanded. I'm going to be spending the next half hour sanding a toothpick. No, I'm not sure how long this will take, but we'll see. Well, the main thing is toothpicks are too thick for the sword blade, especially near the tip. Sanding is down on both sides. and making it thinner. And then I'm going to bevel the edges. Okay, so it's getting thinner. You can see that. It picks up pretty soft, so they give in to the sandpaper pretty quickly. I want this pretty thin, but I also don't want this to just break up on me. See if there's gremlins in the toothpick today. Starting to get thin. It's still thinner down here than it is along the rest of the blade. So I'll keep at this a little bit longer. Getting there. It's like a high groove right in the middle here. But what I did here is made a mistake. When I've done these in the past, okay, I didn't cut it to length first. In the past, I did this time. And what that does is, like, if I hadn't cut that off there, I could be holding it here in a place where I'm not sanding it, as opposed to trying to hold it in a place where I am sanding it. Oh, my mistake. It's getting pretty close to being thin enough. That's not too bad. That's pretty close to being thin enough. Okay, so the next step is to put sort of a little bit of a point on here. This is supposed, I don't know what the sword originally looked like. So I don't know how pointy it's supposed to be, but I'm going to make this one fairly pointy. That is sanded down. So that's not just like a blunt point, but it tapers to the point. Get a decent profile. A little bit asymmetric yet. That's not too bad. Okay. What I want to try to do here on the end is I want to sharpen it. Okay. So, like square edged, like a toothpick, but that there's an edge on it. This is where it would be nice if I could do this while it was laying flat on the surface, but I can't. I don't want to snap it, so I'm not putting much pressure on it. I don't know if I'm going to try this or not, but sometimes these swords have like a blood channel down, especially near the base. I might try to do that. I'm having great fun here, fabricating a toothpick's replacement sword, because I can't really do much with the model. The paint is not drying really quickly, and so I can't do too much highlighting on the body. That's not even close to drying, and even the flight feathers on the wings aren't, which is just as well. So on Monday, I'm going to end early today because things just aren't working again. Just what can I say? Gremlins attacked our internet connection here. I don't think this is live streaming at all. If you're watching it on YouTube, that's what happened, is that between Wednesday and this morning, everything that was working on Wednesday, as far as the internet connection, stopped, which is weird. It's an Ethernet cable, so either the port on the router into which this is plugged went bad, or the Ethernet card in the computer went bad, which would not be a good thing particularly. It's unlikely that there's a break in the cable. I don't know how we would even find that. We can do a continuity test, I guess, but no, I'm just working on contouring the blade of the sword. You can see, I got it down to kind of an edge here on this side, so I'm going to do it on the other side, hopefully without snapping it off. Fortunately, toothpick wood is quite soft and gives way to the sandpaper pretty easily. I'm ending up with a reasonable sword blade replacement, I think. After I'm done with this, just a little bit more here, I'm going to pick up the model and hold it up to it, and then we'll all get to see together curving it, looks like. So lift this up. I mean, it's a little big, but it's good to have, with these models, it's sometimes good to have an exaggerated weapon. It just looks better. I'm going to flatten this end a little bit so that the contact surface is not quite so rounded. Sure. In the past, I've used contact cement to put these on because, with epoxy, I'd have to sit here and hold this for like 2 or 3 minutes. With contact cement, you just touch it and it holds, pretty well. That'll make a good contact. And then it's a matter of lining it up. What I am going to do, and I hope this doesn't mess it up now that I've got it looking mostly okay, I'm going to take an X-Acto knife and do a channel down the center. Base of the blade here. It's not going to be really deep, but it'll be a little indentation. And when it's painted and washed, you might be able to see it on that side. And I'll do one on this side. I'm actually not going to put this on until very close to the end, because as I manipulate the model to try to get paint in the right places and rotate it and things like that, what end up with is a very good chance of just breaking it off again. So this will be like the last thing I do, is gluing this on and painting it. But there's a replacement blade, and yeah, it looks like a sword. It's not bad, not bad. Yeah. What time is it here? Noonish. It's about noon. Let's see if this paint on the wings is dry at all. It's not bad. So the purple on the leading edge of the wings actually turned out okay. That looks, yeah, there's still really wet spots left. There's no place to hold it. Because I need to do something with the flight feathers. And what is that something? Should I paint the trailing edge lighter? Should I try to get the tips of these things highlighted a lighter color, or should they be a dark color? And I was using this dark red, but it wasn't enough on the brush. I'm going to try this again. Get a little more of this out. And get this brush. And this is the trying to dry brush. Just the tips. Guess I need more paint on here. So I'm just highlighting, dry brushing from the tips of these feathers in, just on this one wing. And when this dries, I'm going to do a comparison. You know, like, how does this look compared to the other wings? Did the dark highlighting or dry brushing from the tips inward make it look better, more demonic? Didn't it matter at all? And if it looks good, then I'll do the same thing to the others. And if it doesn't, I will just simply repaint it. But that will need to wait for this to dry. Well, you can see that it's on there. Okay, when I turn it this way, I'm thinking, yeah, that this is working. And it looks better. That looks better than that. And I think the darker tips look better than the lighter. Maybe I will. I don't know. Since it's working, maybe I'm just going to continue. I mean, I didn't even use the right color. I'm using flat brown. No, okay. I guess I'll just keep using it. Weird. I meant to grab this color, but I didn't. I grabbed a different color. Seems to be okay. Here I am doing more than I thought I would do because this thing that I'm doing seems to be working reasonably well, even though I picked the wrong color. It's looking okay. Maybe sometimes errors turn out to be all right, which is good because I I can do errors. I'm pretty good at it, and we've seen quite a few examples from time to time on this stream. I have frequently said this is not a how-to show. If anything, more often than not, it's a how not to show, because I'll do things that you really shouldn't be doing in your own painting workshop, like having a cluttered surface, spilling your coffee mug, dropping brushes, cluttering the work surface yet even more. Do the bottoms. Yeah. So yeah, this is frequently a how not to show. But at one point, I was actually talking about Dyson Dungeons, and Dyson Dungeons is a group of family and friends that has gotten together now for over a year to do a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that has been streaming on Twitch 3 Sundays a month with a live chat at 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And it will remain on Eastern Daylight Time until Standard Time comes back, unless Daylight Savings Time becomes permanent. And I've lost track of whether that's actually happening or not. But 2 o'clock, at whatever the local time is here in the Eastern Zone. And that's with a live chat. And then you can catch up with previous episodes on YouTube or on as a podcast, because we're pretty chatty. We're there's very few moments of silence, especially because of our bard, our Tabaxi Bard 9s. Our Tabaxi Bard will always be happy to fill in any kind of quiet. Okay, if there's anything, if something is quiet, we can count on the bard to fill in the space. Ha. But anyway, yeah, you should check it out because it is an amazing campaign. We're having a lot of fun. Sometimes we have fun retail shopping. Sometimes, like I was saying earlier, we got to go to souvenir shops, and I've been able to pick up some tote bags, and in my character, some tote bags, and occasionally even the snow globe, or the DnD equivalent of a snow globe. The most fun is always going to a magic shop and finding out that we don't have nearly enough gold, platinum coins, money. We don't have enough currency to actually purchase anything useful. But I don't know if you knew this, but the best magic shops always have a discount bin. There's always something that the returns, people didn't like what they had, and it's a good shop who wants to keep good customer relations, so they let people return things for store credit. So there's usually a discount bin, and sometimes it's just something that didn't work, a magic item that they tried out and they're kind of experimenting with it, and it turned out to be a bad idea. And that goes in a discount bin. And so we've been able to pick up some discount items. That's always fun. We frequently look for pretzels or croissants. And then we get into some darker, more dangerous adventures, with murder cults and going into dungeons and sewers, and mostly almost but not quite dying in classic D&D boss fights. This stream, okay, well, this isn't perfect, okay? I'm going to say it's not perfect, but the dark highlighting on the wings, on the flight feathers, I think that's worked. And although it's not the color that I intended to use, it's okay. It might even be better than the color I was planning on. So look at those. Yeah, the wings, the purple up in the front that Nicole had suggested worked. The darkening the tips of the flight feathers. I think that's come out okay. Yeah. So when I get back to this on Monday, because if we can get things working again, there will be a stream at more or less 10 on Monday. I'll be working on the body and the detail of the face because I want the face to come out really well. I'll be putting my head magnifiers on for that to get that detail going, and I'll be using some sort of lighter color for the body, and there's a spot there that didn't get painted. Yeah, I better do that before I finish for today. Yeah, so you need to check out our Dice and Dungeons campaign because it is totally amazingly cool. And as I said, you get to see it and hear it with a live chat 3 Sundays a month at 2:00, whatever time, this Eastern time zone that we're in. And you can also catch it on YouTube or as a podcast. And this stream, Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons, originated because we create dungeon tiles for our dungeons. And I'm going to show them to you, a sample, because I haven't done that in a while. And I'm hoping that people catch this on YouTube because it's not streaming. But I'll show you how those dungeon tiles work. But we started painting dungeon tiles for our campaign so that we had really cool 3-dimensional realistic dungeons in which to do battle and explore. And our DM came up with the idea, well, if we're going to be painting, why don't we stream the painting? And I goes, and why would we want to do that? And she goes, well, why not? We've got an extra camera. It's not like we're using anything really expensive here. We got cardboard, right? We got these paint palettes. I think they're like $3 for a dozen or something. I don't know, probably more expensive than that, but they're not very expensive. We got paint because we needed that, and brushes. In order to paint anything, you need paint and brushes, so we got that. There's an extra microphone, and there. This is our high-tech, not studio workshop that we were painting in, because that's what we're doing, was painting dungeon tiles, and started streaming that. So Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons was all about dungeon tiles and minifigs, like this flying demonic beastie thing that I'll be finishing up on Monday, because the body is just not, the body paint is not drying fast enough to be able to do anything more with it today. So, oh yeah, don't lose that. I spent like 20 minutes fabricating a replacement sword, and I just about threw it away. That would have been a classic Dice and Dungeons Relaxing Painting thing to do, is to throw away the fabricated sword blade. Yeah, so there you can see the thing I'm working on. But yeah, minifigs. Anyway, we started painting things for the stream and said, well, let's just, for the DnD stream, the campaign, why not we stream the painting? And so that's how this started. And for those of you who have been watching it, you know that on Wednesdays, we have Submarine Wednesday. That started because one Wednesday, I didn't have any dungeon tiles or minifigs to paint. And so I pulled out one of the 6 models that I bought when I first retired, because I thought I wouldn't have anything to do, and build models, you know, old guy in the basement building models. That's what you do. Yeah, I never got around to them. But that Wednesday, when I had nothing else to paint, I pulled it out. One of the first things I did was a Fink, and Ed Big Daddy Roth, look it up. It had Rat Fink and a whole bunch of other Finks. I built those all when I was like a sophomore in high school, I think. I think all of them that came out at the time, there were a lot of them, but I did Fink Eliminator, and that wasn't real popular, I guess. People don't remember Finks, and they didn't think that they were cool, but I did a nice job, much better than I did when I was in high school. But then I said, well, what do I do next? It became a tradition to not do minifigs or dungeon tiles on Wednesdays, so I pulled out my Renwall 1960s vintage Renwall cutaway Polaris launching submarine model. It's a cutaway model, and I've been spending forever painting the tiny little detail in it, and I'm getting really close. Maybe as soon as next Wednesday, of getting the to three decks of detail: the control room, the mess hall, a bunk room, and a miscellaneous gyro room, all installed into the hull of the submarine. The installation should be really fun to watch because the pieces don't fit together very well, and they keep falling out, and they lock into place when they're in place, but getting them into place so they lock in place is quite a struggle. So I've been trying to put that off. But last Wednesday, I did move on and found the parts for the next compartment, which is the place where the missiles go. 16 missile tubes. And so depending on how assembly goes, I might begin to actually start cementing together missile tubes and prepping, cleaning up the flashings and the mold marks and stuff on the decks of those sections there. And if I can get it to work, that should move along, and then it will move back to a very boring section of the submarine, which is just like 4 decks and 2 compartments of just machinery that apparently is necessary to turn the steam from the reactor into propulsion. I'm not sure quite why it has that much. I suppose there's like generators to generate electricity and filters for the oxygen in the submarine and stuff. But anyway, I do that on Wednesdays. But before I finish for today and clean up, I'm going to show you our amazing dungeon tiles. I want to do this at least once a week. These are samples of the kinds of things that we build. These are rough stone. Okay, we also have cut stone, which look like, nice floor tiles and bricks, and we have some amazing wooden ones that occasionally show up on the scroll there, where there are wooden floors and wooden walls with stucco inserts. But these were modified and engineered by our DM and they're printed on the 3D printers back there. So we make these ourselves from scratch, so to speak. They are very sturdy because they're set up so that the wall and the floor are a single printed piece. I mean, except for the base plate, and I'll explain that in a bit, this whole thing is just one solid, well, it's not solid, but, there's internal gaps in the printing to save plastic, but one piece. And so, you could drop these things, you can, do all sorts of stuff to it, and they're very, very sturdy. And, this stays at a 90-degree angle so that when you line them up, all the walls line up really nicely and they're not tilted or anything. And so this is the kind of stuff we've been painting when we do painting of dungeon tiles. These are base coated. They're primed and then base coated in gray, and then the highlight blocks are painted in. It's all hand painted, all of it. And then the magic is that under this base, are little ball magnets, little round magnets that fit into wells, and they rotate inside the wells so that they can always match up north to south, and they stick to each other. And you can reconfigure them very quickly and easily. And because the ball magnets are in all the sides and corners, it does that. So you can imagine if you've got a lot of these things, you can very quickly and easily set up all sorts of different dungeon configurations. Okay. And I know that there are some that call themselves magnetic, but what they just, not to diss them, but to differentiate, is that there's a flat magnet in the base, and you have to use a metal, like a pie pan or a custom metal magnetic base for them to stick. But these stick to each other, not to a base. So you can use them on any surface, like this cardboard, high-tech work surface cardboard here sitting on top of a workbench. Yeah. So the finishing stage of these is that we get a dark gray wash and just wash them, and it really brings them to life. But the sample I have isn't washed. Maybe someday I'll bring, what I really should do is bring some of the wooden ones out and so on. Someday, just as a teaser, we might even make these available as sets, like some of the sets that you see there, like a necromancy lair or a tavern or a warehouse or sort of thing, that we might even have sets of these painted, either primed, so you can paint them themselves, or hand painted, so that you can make your Dungeons and Dragons campaign highly realistic and wonderful. But for now, I just wanted to show these to you because this is how relaxing painting started, is by mass-produce painting these things. The last time we did dungeon tiles, I don't know, it was like a month or so ago, doing sewers. We have really cool sewer tiles, which are kind of like cut stone, but they're multi-layered, so that they look like there's sewage flowing through the center, even just like a little drizzle of epoxy, so that it looks like water flowing, and black and then green for the moss and gray, and they're really pretty sewery. So that's how relaxing painting started, painting dungeon tiles, painting minifigs like this one that I'm working on, waiting for the paint to dry. And I will be back, I hope. There's sort of a necromancy lair one there. And that's a custom tile that we did with a fire sigil imprinted on the wall, which is cool. And that's how they fit. You can see the fire sigils along the walls there, and in the center is a cauldron, and that cauldron has a magnet in the base, and a flame goes into it. So I'm going to end early today because things aren't working. I did get the base coat put on this entire thing. I finished the wings, and I think the wings came out pretty decent, considering my skill level. I'm a skill level 1 painter, but I think they came out okay. And Nikki's idea of using a purple highlight actually worked, I think, pretty well. I wouldn't have done that without her suggestion. Oh, there's a spot there that's way too purple. I hate to do this, but almost always I find during one of these streams that there's a spot that just doesn't look right, and then just as I'm about to wrap up, I have to get out a drop of paint and a little brush. Basically, it's a purple spot, and just touch it up because I can't let it go. It just doesn't look good. Yeah. So that's all it was. Yeah. Hopefully between now and Monday, we'll find out what the problem is with the internet connection here down in the workshop, not studio. Definitely, you can tell this is not a high-tech studio. It is a workshop. Hopefully, is that cursor showing? There we go. Hopefully we'll get it working again and be able to do a full stream. I will finish up by this beast by painting its face. At the pace I go, that should take forever. And I'm going to do some highlighting on the body, just so it's not quite so monochrome. And then if that gets finished, I might move on to another minifig. And then next Wednesday, we'll go back to Submarine Wednesday and see if I make a breakthrough in assembly and get a big chunk of it done, or whether that turns into a struggle that will require a good deal of rework. I don't know. But thanks for joining in this abbreviated session of Relaxing Painting with Dice and Dungeons. We'll be working on our technical difficulties once again, and I hope that you join Relaxing Painting on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from more or less 10 until more or less 2. Been a lot less than 2 the last couple of streams, and a lot more than 10. Yeah, it's been that kind of thing. But yes, please join in Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, some sort of around 10-ish until sort of around 2-ish, unless it starts late or ends early. And also, very importantly, come and watch our Dungeons and Dragons campaign at 2 o'clock, 3 Sundays a month. I think this coming Sunday is going to be a rebroadcast of a special that was produced last year, Rootin' Tootin' Wild West Adventure, which is, anyway, it's just a whole lot of fun. It's a one-shot that was just a lot of fun to produce and to watch. And if you like what you see, please become a follower, become a sponsor. Becoming a sponsor of Dice and Dungeons is really cool. Become a viewer. Tell everybody to watch, because the more viewers we have, the more success we have. And the more success we have, the more minifigs we can print on our rosin printer, and the more dungeon tiles we can print on our PLA printers, and the more stuff we can paint and show off on our DnD campaign. And if you really like what you see or hear or both, go to patreon.com/diceanddungeons, patreon.com/diceanddungeons, and become a patron. And if you become a patron, you get things like you get to see our improv sessions, our warm-up sessions for our D&D campaign, and access to our DM notes from prior sessions. Yeah, enough chatting. Letting the paint dry, because it's drying really slowly for some reason today. And I'll be back on Monday, I hope, finishing up this some sort of flying demon thing. And if I finish that, doing something else that is almost certain to be hideous and demonic. And Wednesday, Submarine Wednesday. Yep, I'm starting to fade. I need to go have a snack. You too. See you next week. Have a good weekend. Join us on Sunday if you possibly can. Thanks and goodbye.